Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the Daily Debate. My name is Ahmed Nader, and tonight we will be focusing on the latest statements made by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi on the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam and the presidential activities in this regard regarding the water scarcity, not just in Egypt but in Africa in general, as Egypt launched today the Cairo Water Week in its 4th edition. We'll be having a quick report about the launch of the Cairo Water Week, but first of all, I am honored to be having with me in the studio for the daily debate for tonight, Dr. Mohamed Bayoumi, the Assistant Resident Representative at the United Nations Development Programme, the UNDP. Thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Thank you very much.
Anytime. We'll be heading straight away to the first report of the daily debate for tonight, and Egypt launching the 4th edition of the Cairo Water Week. We'll be having more information about its significance for Egypt, for Africa and for the world in the upcoming report.
President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has stressed Egypt's keenness to reach a legally binding and balanced agreement as soon as possible and without further delay on the long-standing dispute with Ethiopia on the GERD. In a recorded message to the opening session of the 4th Cairo Water Week, President al-Sisi said that he would like to stress Egypt's aspiration to reach as soon as possible and without further delay a balanced and legally binding agreement in line with the presidential statement issued by the Security Council in September 2021. He added that the Egyptian government has drafted out a national strategy for managing water resources in the country worth $50 billion and is open to increase it as the state executes this strategy. He noted that such a strategy depends on 4 main points, including rationalizing the usage of available water resources, improving water quality, finding new water resources through water desalination, and increasing the people's awareness about the importance of water. The president said that such an agreement would guarantee Ethiopia's development goals as well as limit the water environmental, social, and economic damages of the dam to the downstream countries Egypt and Sudan. The decades-old negotiations between Egypt, Sudan and Ethiopia last stalled in April, with both downstream countries blaming the latest instance of failure of the talks on Ethiopia. Egypt and Sudan have been negotiating with Ethiopia for 10 years to reach a legally binding agreement that regulates the rules for filling and operating the dam. Egypt fears that its water supply will be diminished by the dam, while Sudan is concerned about regulating flows to its own dams. Ethiopia has repeatedly refused to sign such a deal and instead insists on mere guidelines that can be modified at any time at its discretion. In September, the UN Security Council adopted a presidential statement encouraging Egypt, Sudan and Ethiopia to resume the negotiations to swiftly reach a mutually acceptable and binding agreement on the filling and operating of Ethiopia's mega dam. Cairo and Khartoum resorted to the Security Council after Ethiopia unilaterally completed the first and second filling of its controversial dam despite the absence of an agreement.
لدينا مصير مشترك.
مصر تسلمت الرئاسة الدورية للاتحاد الإفريقي لعام 2019 وتتطلع كعادتها دوما للتعبير عن شواغل الشعوب الإفريقية الشقيقة الرامية لتحقيق الاستقرار والتقدم ودفع عجلة التنمية قدما.
إذا كنتم ترغبون في تغيير وجه القارة الأفريقية، فالاتحاد الافريقي كقياده تستطيع ان تعمل وتبذل بشكل مركزي لمشروع عملاق لبناء بنيه اساسيه على مستوى القاره. انا اتصور ان الامن والاستقرار استثمار. إذا لم تستقر هذه القارة والأمن فيها بمعدلاته عالية، هذا الأمر سينعكس بالسلب علينا كلنا.
Welcome back. You're still watching the Daily Debate. As I said in the beginning, that tonight we'll be focusing on Egypt launching the 4th edition of the Cairo Water Week. Dr. Mohamed Bayoumi, the significance of launching such an edition in its 4th version in Egypt, the Cairo Water Week. What is the significance of such an event for Egypt, Africa, and for the world?
Yes, the Cairo Water Week is becoming actually an important water event, an important annual water event. It's taking its share and attention as a global event. It's an international event being attended by lots of representatives from different countries. And it comes at a time that Egypt is giving great attention to the water issue. What we see today in terms of water projects in the country is unprecedented over the last 3-4 years. We see great progress in terms of reuse and treatment of water and reuse for agriculture. We see, and this was inaugurated a few months ago, a large wastewater treatment facility in Bahr al-Bar. We see lots of projects related to flood protection, which is associated with the climate change impacts on the water resources. We see the national program for canal lining. Egypt announced a large, ambitious program on desalination of seawater for satisfying needs for drinking water. So we see a lot, coming from Egypt in this respect. And this is important to be shared with the African countries and the whole world, where it's becoming a forum for dissemination of information and exchange of experience.
Yes, speaking of information and to be sharing information among the Egyptians, the Africans, and the global citizens, if we can call them that, about the water scarcity, what is the importance of raising awareness about water security and water scarcity for the Egyptians and for the Africans?
Obviously, Egypt is a water scarce country. The per capita share of the Egyptian annual per capita share of water for the Egyptian is below the so-called water poverty level. So we're talking about a country that has great challenges satisfying the needs of the population mainly for agriculture purposes, using the water for agricultural purposes. And obviously the population is increasing, and the share of Egypt from the River Nile is fixed. So there is no way except to look for other alternatives. And benefiting from the advancement in the technology, as I mentioned, the examples that I've mentioned, Egypt is trying to reduce the seepage from the canals and improving the unconventional water resources like grain harvesting and desalination. And there is a lot to be shared in this respect with Africa. To add to what I have mentioned is the dimension of climate change, which is coming with lots of uncertainty in connection to the availability of water resources, which requires more effort in terms of adapting with climate change, in terms of making more water available to satisfy the needs for the growing population with less uncertainty about the changes on one hand, and adapting with the low-lying lands in the river deltas to accommodate the expected sea level rise.
Mm-hmm. How bad is the water issue for the Africans now?
The issue is quite complex, actually, because Africa is mainly suffering from the so-called economic water scarcity. Egypt is suffering from a physical water scarcity, that we don't have water in the first place, and we have to look for other alternatives and unconventional resources. But the problem in Africa is more about economic. In most parts of Africa is economic water scarcity, where water is available in terms of per capita share of the person is quite huge, but it's the issue that there is no investments for securing networks to deliver the water either for drinking water or irrigation purposes. And it's a different issue, but as I mentioned, there is a lot for Africa to gain from the experience in Egypt, and Egypt has a lot to submit and assist the African countries in developing and overcoming their economic water scarcity.
Is the issue of water scarcity in Egypt and in Africa getting worse due to the climate change issues now?
Obviously, climate change is adding a new dimension to the story. Climate change is disrupting the standard or usual patterns for rainfall, and this is going to have a great impact on agricultural activities in the first place. Climate change is coming with the sea level rise, and as I mentioned, the low-lying lands in the river deltas is going to be vulnerable to sea level rise, flooding in one hand, seawater intrusion like we see in the Nile Delta right now, which is affecting the productivity of the land. And the third dimension is the extreme weather events, which comes with the heavy precipitation, unexpected heavy precipitations, where the infrastructure is not designed in these countries to accommodate the amount of water that falls in a very short period of time associated with the climate change again.
While we are discussing the issue of climate change in general and more specifically in Egypt, how do you see the efforts of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and the Egyptian government to be raising awareness of the Egyptians about climate change in general, about hosting the possibility of hosting the COP27 here in Egypt? What is the importance of raising the awareness about climate change in general?
This is extremely important, and I think, as I mentioned, as I believe that the government has done a lot over the last few years in terms of increasing awareness. Obviously, hosting the COP27 is going to increase the awareness about the issue. Hopefully, the Egyptians will start to learn about the importance of climate change and how to deal with climate change and what I need to do in order to mitigate or reduce my carbon footprint on one hand, and adapt in terms of the changes that are taking place, and we cannot avoid, as we need to do things in order to reduce the impact of these changes. This is with respect to climate change. And when it comes to water issues, I believe that Egyptians now are aware about the issue of water scarcity, that Egypt is not anymore the water rich country as it used to be in the past.
Yes.
Yeah, we are suffering from water scarcity, and this has to be reflected on the human behavior towards this precious resource in terms of using it and maximizing the economic benefit out of it.
Which are the most vulnerable countries affected by climate change and water scarcity in Africa?
Water scarcity, unfortunately, it is the Arab states. I mean, in the Arab region in general is the most water scarce region in the world. And as we know that the majority of the water resources in the Arab region comes from outside its borders. And this adds to the level of difficulty for managing the water resources within the Arab region. The new dimension of climate change, obviously climate change is going to affect as I mentioned before, the rainfall patterns on the riparian countries in terms of the water catchments, and this would be changing the traditional normal water floods. And the UN is working, actually, as I belong to the UN family. We're working on two tracks in this respect, that we have to manage the fluctuation in the water resources on one hand, and assisting the countries on the other hand to alleviate the impacts of climate change through the techniques known as disaster risk reduction, preparing for the expected scenarios and trying to manage and reduce the impact in order to minimize the loss of lives as well as economic damages.
A couple of problems regarding water resources in Africa and in the world in general were discussed at the event and will be discussed during the events of the conference. One of them is water safety, and the other is having enough water to be producing food. So it is water and food at the same time, representing a huge problem for Africa. How do you think countries will be facing up against those two problems?
Thank you for this question, because obviously the issue of water is linked in the first place with the food production, But the third dimension of the story is energy, because you need energy in order to use the water and pump the water and benefit from it. The world in general, there is no scarcity in water, but we have to agree that agricultural activities is not the best utilization in terms of economic return for water. But obviously agriculture has a social dimension, because if people are not going to cultivate and do irrigation and agricultural farming, we are not going to have food. I mean, it's sufficient food for the global population. In general, Africa has a big potential to enrich and enhance its water development and increase its food productivity, food production in general, and this is extremely important on the agenda, and this should be coupled by the advantage that we have today with the reduced prices of solar energy that can enable pumping the water and you having the power to irrigate and cultivate, which was not in the past. 5 years ago, this was expensive technology. Today, we are talking about a cost-effective technology that can support production in Africa and in the region in general.
In the opening statements of His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to the conference, he said that Egypt now has a national water strategy that will be extending up until 2037. How do you see the importance of having a plan for the country? This is the first time that we hear as citizens about a plan for water, a strategy for water up until 2037, and the importance and the results, the expected results of such a strategy.
Yes, there used to be previous strategies, actually water strategies in Egypt. This is not the first one. But obviously, taking the attention that the water issues is receiving right now in Egypt, I'm glad that the public and the layman in Egypt is concerned now with the water strategy. And the water strategy is going to be very important over the coming period for the reasons that we have explained, that the expected water shortage coupled with the climate change and the uncertainty associated with climate change and the River Nile flow. So the strategy is going to be of extremely importance to Egypt. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we see now some elements of the strategy, the conservation of water, we see the treatment of water at a large scale, and the ambitious program for desalination that is going to be helped by the reduced prices of producing electricity from solar energy. This will help in moving ahead the ambitious desalination program for drinking water. Until the moment, the desalinated water is not cost effective in agriculture. We hope that the technology is going to improve to reduce the cost of desalinated water for agriculture, and this is going to be the breakthrough the whole world is waiting for, actually. But at the moment, it's cost effective for drinking water, and this is going to save some water for agriculture, which is extremely important, obviously, in producing our own food in Egypt.
The strategy has 4 main pillars. One of them is to be rationalizing the water usage. How do you see the awareness that we talked about in this field specifically to be rationalizing the water usage for yourself as a citizen? And do you think that this will be getting the results that we want in the near future?
The message has to be passed to all Egyptian citizens on how to use the water. I would like to take the correlation with another precious resource that we use not to treat well in Egypt, which is electricity. And today, with the increased prices and the increased tariffs, the revised tariffs of electricity, you see, and the Egyptians, how they are dealing with the electricity and conserving it. Despite the fact that still the electricity prices in Egypt is one of the cheapest globally. But now the Egyptians are dealing with these natural resources, giving it the respect that it should be given. And accordingly, this is not going to reduce their consumption, but it's going to be rationalizing, as the right word that you have used.
The same scenario in water.
I will see that the same scenario in water is coming. It's going to be on the household level on one hand, and on the irrigation water, which is obviously the bulk of the Egyptian water is being used in irrigation. More than 85% of the River Nile water is used for irrigation. We will see more of water conservation projects to increase the efficiency, shifting to modern irrigation systems, protected cultivation, increase crop yield, and in the same time reduce water consumption together with the canal lining. I just visited one of these projects a week ago. It's really impressive and something very promising, and I have spoken with the farmers. I have seen their feeling, about the improvement in the crop yield, as well as the more availability of water that they used to be seeping from the earthen canals. So it's very promising program, and this is be complemented with the other dimension of this strategy.
The second pillar of the strategy is to be diversifying the water resources. How can that be done here in Egypt, as we did see the same strategies being implemented in the Gulf states, for example, in other countries all over the world?
Probably the dimension of diversification in Egypt is different from the Gulf states because of the availability of the River Nile. Egypt is known to have an overall high water use efficiency, but apparently there is more to be done. Today we see, a few months ago, we have seen the inauguration of Bahr al-Bar wastewater treatment plant, and this is water, drainage water that used to go to the sea. Now it's being treated and it's going to be diverted to agricultural activities in North Sinai, which is again extremely important element in reuse of the water. And as I mentioned, the ambitious desalination program should satisfy the needs of water of the Egyptians. In the past, we used to have large projects in order to deliver the potable water from Cairo to Marsa Matruh or to Sinai. Probably the future is not going to be like that. You don't need to have these extensions of potable water. Desalination is going to be able to resolve the issue, and localized, decentralized potable water system coming from desalination technology, with the decrease in the prices of desalination, both because of the technology improvement as well as the reduction of the cost of solar energy. All of that is going to contribute to a cheaper desalinated water that can satisfy the needs of the local communities without extending the pipes for hundreds of kilometers.
Yes, the expansion of the water desalination projects. How do you see the steps taken, especially in the past 7 or 8 years?
There was big progress, obviously, over the last 4 or 5 years in particular, in the amount of desalinated water in Egypt. But from what we have seen, in the vision about the reaching 6.4 million cubic meter of water, of desalinated water a day, this is a large figure. Actually, this is something big, and we are expecting to see this being implemented and achieved in Egypt, which is going to alleviate a big part of the growing needs for drinking water for the growing population in Egypt.
But it wouldn't be helping in agriculture?
Not yet. Unfortunately, not yet. But obviously, as long as you are saving, the population of Egypt is growing, and every new person is born, he needs water for drinking. And if you can satisfy these needs, from desalinated water, you are saving this water for agriculture. Because obviously, drinking water comes before agriculture in priority. So, indirectly, you are saving water for agriculture.
Does this mean that Egypt is facing the problem of water scarcity? Because we had been dependent for a long time on the Nile River.
Egypt will continue to be dependent on the Nile River for years to come, and it's going to remain as the main source of water. But as I mentioned, the needs are increasing, and the share of Egypt from the River Nile is fixed, and the ambitions for development, not only for agriculture but other uses, the residential sector, industrial sector, all these need water. And as I mentioned, this is not going to be satisfied from the River Nile as long as the share of water of Egypt is fixed. So it will be the unconventional means of water resources, either by treatment of wastewater, which has a limit, but the unlimited resource is going to be desalination. With the improvement of the technology, we should see new advancement in the technology that reduces the prices, the cost, and alleviating the environmental aspects related to desalination of water, which is the brown water, and how you can get rid of it after doing the desalination. But I'm confident with the improvement in the technology, with what I have seen in solar energy over the last 10 years. I'm confident that we're going to see big jumps in this respect in desalination as well.
Yes, Doctor, you mentioned the new methods, the new techniques, the new technology in solar energy, in the water desalination projects. But how much time do we need to be getting those techniques, this technology in Egypt? How much time could it be consuming to be coming here and being implemented at the same time?
Solar energy, we have started this already. The cheapest source of electricity on Earth right now is coming from the sun. So we know that, and the the electricity coming from the sun is like 10% of the cost of electricity coming from thermal power stations. So this is available right now. It is about adapting this technology to serve your purposes. This is what the so-called solutions, energy solutions. This is what we're looking for, where I'm going to put the solar power station in a crowded area. I cannot do that. We have lots of desert areas which are free, that I can put the solar power plants over there and get the connection with the desalination plant. This is the manipulation and the application of the technology which needs the thinking right now. But the technology is available and provide the electricity at a very reasonable price that can help a lot, as I mentioned, in reducing the cost of desalination.
Yes, Doctor, you've also mentioned that Egypt will be depending on the Nile River waters for years to come. But this pops up the question, is the waters of the Nile River, are they being well managed by the riparian countries?
The Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation has been doing lots of research and investigations, actually, and there are lots of losses that are encountered in the riparian countries in terms of River Nile water, and there are plans for several projects that can secure some of the water, from riparian countries which are lost in wetlands and in other elements. Jonglei Canal, which Egypt started in the 1980s actually to do in the south of Sudan, was one of these projects that could have brought like 4 billion cubic meter of water, which is significant amount of water. Yeah. It stopped because of the political instability in south of Sudan, but I believe that these projects need to be looked into again and revived. They're going to be more level of difficulty in implementation than it used to be in the past because of the environmental considerations related to wetlands and the wildlife over there. But I believe that there is big potential that this can take place, and the views are going broad also to other river basin in Africa, like the Congo river basin, a huge amount of water. In the past, it was impossible to think of moving the water, to connect it with the River Nile. But today, with the improvement in the technology and the pumping systems and the cost of electricity, as I mentioned, all of the things that were impossible in the past are becoming more possible in the future now.
Does this mean that the Nile Basin countries, they need to be having the same methods of saving water, of facing up to the same water scarcity issues that we have here in Egypt? They need to be following the same methods in the Nile Basin countries, especially in irrigation.
Irrigation in most riparian countries is rain-fed because they have lots of rain, actually. The River Nile actually is the drain for all the water uses that they have in riparian countries. After everything is, the land is satisfied and they do the rain-fed agriculture, the drainage water is actually the River Nile that comes over there to Egypt and Sudan afterwards. To Sudan and Egypt. So the situation, the water situation in Nile riparian countries is different from Egypt. Egypt is depending on the surface water. In African countries, they are more dependent on rain-fed agriculture, as I mentioned. But the problem they faced, as I said at the beginning, the economic water scarcity. They don't have a sufficient amount of investments into the infrastructure to be able to utilize this water in a more efficient manner. Obviously, there is big space for African countries to increase productivity out of this water with the investment in water development, which Egypt, as I mentioned, can help in this respect enormously with the experience gained under the water scarcity conditions in this country.
Yes, in Africa, the investments in infrastructure, how do you see the efforts of Egypt specifically in this field? Because we heard in the past 7 or 8 years that Egypt is investing in building new dams in Tanzania, for example, in Uganda, for example. Does this mean that it is for the benefit of Africa and the benefit of Egypt at the same time?
For sure, the benefit of Africa is the benefit of Egypt in general. And strong Africa and more productive Africa is in favor of Egypt. Egypt is not self-sufficient in terms of food. And unfortunately, Egypt will never be self-sufficient under the current technologies that we have because of the water scarcity that we have. The per capita share of fresh water resources in Egypt will not allow Egypt to be self-sufficient. If Africa can produce and increase the production of food, this is going to be in the benefit of Egypt for sure. And there is lots of ideas that has been floating over the last 2 decades. I mean that Egypt can invest in agriculture and cultivation in Africa to secure its food needs. So the cooperation is open, and as I mentioned, a stable Africa means a stable Egypt, and wealthy Africa means wealthy Egypt, and the fate is connected, and the resources are connected as well.
Yes, stable Africa means a stable Egypt, as we will be having more information about that in the upcoming report about the 4th edition of the Cairo Water Week, so stay tuned.
Egypt launched on Sunday the 4th edition of Cairo Water Week CWW, the annual event that aims at spreading awareness on water issues and promote innovation to face the most pressing water-related challenges. The Hungarian President Johannes Adar and Egyptian Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli addressed the CWW's attendees. The 5-day gathering is organized by the Ministry of Irrigation and Water Resources in cooperation with partners from regional and international organizations, as well as national institutions, authorities, and ministries. The Irrigation Ministry said that a wide participation of ministers, official delegations, and senior officials in the water sector will attend the occasion alongside host of scientists, representatives of international organizations and institutes, and civil society organizations from different countries of the world. An expo featuring modern irrigation techniques, smart irrigation, and water reuse methods is being held on the sidelines of the event with the participation of 34 companies. The event also includes competitions to choose the best 3-minute presentation of master's or PhD thesis and the most innovative ideas to rationalize water consumption. Egypt, as one of the most water-scarce countries in the world, is paying special attention to water issues. Egypt is working on filling the gap through the reuse of agricultural wastewater and groundwater, in addition to importing food products that would otherwise consume 34 BCM of water annually to produce. In a previous statement by Minister of Irrigation and Water Resources Mohamed Abdelati, he explained that Egypt overcomes water scarcity by improving 54% of its virtual water, which is embedded water required to produce commodities, and reusing 42% of renewable energy. Egypt has drawn up a strategy for its water resources through 2050 at a cost of up to 900 billion Egyptian pounds. The strategy is based on a 4-point national water resources plan, which runs through 2037 and is based on rationalizing water use, improving water quality, providing additional water resources, and creating a climate suitable for optimal water management.
Welcome back. You're still watching the Daily Debate. As I said in the beginning, that tonight we'll be focusing on the 4th edition of the Cairo Water Week. Dr. Mohamed Bayoumi, the Assistant President Representative at the United Nations Development Programme, the UNDP, you will be attending one of the sessions of the Cairo Water Week. Tell me more about that.
Yes, we as a UNDP were implementing a project with the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation on the protection of the low-lying lands in the Nile Delta. This is an ongoing work that UNDP is working with the ministry over the last 10 years. Started with testing some low-cost technology for protection of the lands in the Nile Delta from the sea level rise. And through the work with the Shore Protection Authority of the ministry, we were able to find low-cost technologies that are nature-based, using the technology from the local communities on increasing or elevating the land levels in order to be able to protect from the extreme weather events and the sea surges during the big storms that are becoming more frequent in Egypt. The project is working for the 3rd year right now, and it includes construction of soft engineering solutions and dike systems along the coast of the Nile Delta for like 69 kilometers. And the Cairo Water Week is a big opportunity actually that we show the progress of the work. The project is attracting the attention now of the international development agencies because the project was funded from the Green Climate Fund, the biggest funding mechanism, multilateral funding mechanism related to climate change globally. And the donors in this Green Climate Fund were satisfied to see the progress taking place in Egypt with this technology. As I mentioned, very low-cost technology, but it serves the purpose at least over the coming 20-25 years.
Doctor, in general, how do you see the cooperation and the coordination between the Egyptian government under President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi with the UNDP in specific and the United Nations associations in general?
I have to acknowledge the improvement in the relationship between the government of Egypt and the UNDP over the last few years, and the UN family in general. Last month, Egypt, His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi was attending the launch of the UNDP National Human Development Report, and this comes after 10 years actually of stop. It's an important report. Actually, the Human Development Report is a product of the UNDP that's implemented in most developing countries, and it provides a track for development. So the comeback of the report actually after 10 years is a big achievement for the UNDP under the current system, and this was an important milestone for the UNDP. Which opened the door actually for the development activities in general, which environment is one of it. There's other development activities as well, with the plans coming out of the Human Development Report will be able to find its way to implementation.
How does the United Nations see the Sustainable Development Strategy here in Egypt 2030 and the one cooperating and integrated with Africa 2063?
Egypt was actually a leading country in the development of Sustainable Development Strategy 2030 that was launched a few years ago. Even before the new Sustainable Development Goals of the UN, Egypt launched its strategy. The strategy now, as far as I understand, is being revised to be more aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals, and this is an extremely important tool for monitoring progress and seeing the impact of the big resources that are being channeled today in Egypt in terms of development projects. We mentioned the several projects in the water sector, but yes, there are other development activities taking place in the other sectors. And the SDGs, the concept of the Sustainable Development Goals with indicators and targets is a very powerful tool in monitoring the progress and seeing where you are going. And if you want to increase the resources, shift it, modify it in order to reach the plans and the set targets. So this is something I believe is a big step to have this Sustainable Development Strategy in Egypt, which I hope will be monitored rigorously and revised in a dynamic process.
Focusing on development in Egypt, a Decent Life initiative is targeting about 50% of the population in the country. How would you rate such an initiative?
This is an important, the most important development initiative we have seen in Egypt for Egypt, and it's an opportunity for international agencies, whether it's the UN or other development partners, to join forces with this initiative. It's an integrated approach for local economic development based on the locality, and it will gather lots of other initiatives that were taking place individually. Now they are going to be focused in one location. I think, as I mentioned, it's an opportunity for the UN agencies, and this is how the UN agencies are looking for it, and how to contribute and not to miss this opportunity and join forces with the government on the implementation, because there is always a need for new innovative ideas in terms of the solutions, and there is no fixed solution that can fit all for rural Egypt. So we are coming with the experience from other countries to share this experience for the different aspects of development. Hopefully this will be implemented and being promoted under the Decent Life initiative.
During the course of the Cairo Water Week, and a variety of topics will be focusing on achieving development in terms or under the water scarcity issue that we have here in Egypt, in Africa, in the world. Is this attainable to be achieving development under such an issue?
I'm on the optimistic side, actually. The development of the technology that I have seen recently over the last 10 years, pushed by the need for the population to overcome the climate change challenge, give me lots of optimism that we'll be able to find the right means for overcoming the global water crisis that the world is living in. The population, the world population used to see the summit taking place every year related to the Conference of Party on Climate Change that will be hosted in Egypt next year, as mentioned. The normal citizen doesn't know why these people are meeting every year. But from a practitioner level and then seeing things on the ground, I can say that the development of the technologies related to greenhouse gas mitigation and the adaptation to climate change has progressed over the last years with unprecedented development happened. We're talking today about prices of solar energy that are like 10% what we used to have in 2010. The prices dropped by 90%, and this would have never happened except unless there was a huge amount of money has been injected into research and development, and we see the fruits of this research and development in the technologies. So as I mentioned, I'm optimistic that the technology development that we have seen in energy is going to be transmitted into water. The technologies that were not economically and financially viable 10 years ago, they are becoming more viable today because thanks for the cheap energy that we have from solar energy, they are becoming more economically viable and financially viable, and this will push the momentum of these technologies to find solutions for the world population.
The conference will also tackle non-conventional water resources. What does that mean?
Non-conventional water resources, we spoke in our discussion about desalination. This is an important, I believe this is going to be the future and the main source of, unconventional main source of water in the future. But other unconventional resources is the reuse of drainage water, the treatment. Treatment is costly, the technology is available, but it is costly. And with the improvement of the technology all the time, these technologies are commercialized and the cost is going down. The third element of the unconventional resources is the rain harvesting. Instead of having these flash floods come with the devastating impact on the local communities and the population, with some of protective structures that are being constructed, and the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation is expanding the use of these systems over the last few years, actually extensively. You will be able to harvest this rainfall, and instead of taming the flash floods and converting it into a resource that can replenish the groundwater or could be used by the local communities. All of these are unconventional water resources that we'll see more of it, coming in the future. Today, in the exhibition and the new technologies coming with water, they are absorbing water from the humidity in the air. All of these technologies were not possible in the past because of the energy need, and as long as the energy cost is going to be reduced, we're going to see more of these technologies and upgrade of these technologies.
The conflicts over the water resources all over the world, we had seen a lot of them in the past, and we can see that future conflicts will be happening. What is the role of the world leaders to be avoiding such a conflict over water resources?
The UN has a big role to play, actually, to convene world leaders and find solutions for the mutual benefit of using the water resources. I have to acknowledge that the situation in the Arab region is more difficult than the rest of the world in terms of water scarcity, but there is always solutions can be found. Negotiation is the process that should be pursued, and as I mentioned, with the advancement of the technology, in particular when we're talking about energy, solutions which were not possible in the past, they will be possible in the future and in the near future. I'm not talking about long term. I'm talking in the very near future. We're going to see things that were not possible to be done in the past, and they will be attainable and possible. In Egypt, even in particular, we can see today a large expansion of agricultural development in the desert using solar energy. This was not possible 10 years ago. And we can see a lot of that today. And the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation, they have the plan for the development of the new lands using solar water pumping. This was not possible 10 years ago. Today, there are areas in Egypt in the desert that the people and the local communities knew that there were water under the ground over here, but the logistics of bringing fuel, I mean, to use the diesel generators for giving energy to the pumps was difficult, and this makes the whole agricultural development and the water development in this area more difficult. Today, with the solar energy and the cheap electricity coming from solar energy, this is becoming possible, and it's expanding rapidly الحقيقة. But the issue now that we would like to divert the attention to, that not every water in the desert has to be used for agriculture. This has to be the traditional way of thinking in the past, because everything I want to produce food. Now, with the availability of this water and the access of this water, I can maximize the economic benefit out of this water much more than using it for agriculture. And this is the way of thinking that we need to change the as we call it, I mean, you know, the dollar per drop, I mean, you know, of water can be increased significantly if I'm using it for establishing industrial cities or IT cities in the middle of the desert, which were not possible in the past because there was no water and the pumping of water was very costly and polluting as well. Using diesel generators with solar energy, they can do lots of things that were not possible in the past, and using this precious water in the desert.
What are the main causes for the depletion of water resources, the freshwater resources all over the world?
All over the world, there is no water shortage over the world, but we have uneven distribution of the water resources around the world. There are countries where the per capita share of water is enormous, and there are countries like Egypt and the Arab states where the per capita share of water is below this water poverty level. So it's the uneven distribution of water that we are facing over the whole world. I wouldn't, and this is part of the crisis. Yeah, and the crisis is mainly of economic water scarcity. How we can utilize the water and invest in the water in order to, in the first place, secure, cultivate food or produce food that can cover the whole world. And not necessarily that each country has to reach self-sufficiency in terms of food production, but there has to be global food self-sufficiency, and this is possible with the available water resources on Earth. Taking into consideration the dimension of climate change, as we have mentioned, yes, this is adding a level of challenge and difficulty, because we can see crops, I mean, you know, in one country that can be destroyed completely because of heat waves or cold waves in the wrong season. And this really can take care of, I mean, you know, with the adaptation measures and the improvement of the protected cultivation systems and other techniques used to protect the crops from the extreme weather events.
Yes, Dr. Mohamed Bayoumi, the Assistant Resident Representative at the United Nations Development Programme, the UNDP. Thank you very much for being with us tonight on the Daily Debate.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much.
The pleasure is all mine. And this brings us to the end of the Daily Debate for tonight. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.
اسلمي يا مصر إنني الفدا